I thought tonight would be different. After 3 years of missed holidays and cold shoulders, my family finally invited me to Thanksgiving dinner at Romano's, the fanciest restaurant in town. I walked through those glass doors expecting warmth, reconciliation, maybe even an apology. Instead, my brother Derek looked up from the beautifully set table where 22 family members sat, laughing and chatting, pointed to a tiny corner table, barely big enough for one person, and announced with a smirk that cut through my heart like ice, "This table's for family only." The entire room erupted in laughter as servers awkwardly shuffled me to that isolated spot like I was some unwanted stranger. Growing up as the middle child in the Patterson family meant learning early that I would never quite fit the mold. While my older brother Derek inherited dad's rugged good looks and natural charm, and my younger sister Jessica possessed mom's delicate features and social grace, I got the stubborn chin and analytical mind that made family gatherings feel like diplomatic missions. Derek took over Patterson Construction when Dad started talking about retirement 5 years ago. The business had been in our family for 3 generations, and everyone assumed it would continue thriving under his leadership. He married Amanda, right out of high school, bought a sprawling house in the suburbs, and produced 2 adorable children who became the center of every family celebration. Jessica followed a different but equally approved path. She studied art history at a private college, met her husband Trevor at a gallery opening, and settled into the role of wealthy wife and mother with apparent contentment. Her Instagram account overflowed with pictures of designer handbags, exotic vacations, and carefully staged family moments that garnered hundreds of likes from envious friends. Then there was me, Brianna Patterson, the one who chose a different route entirely. While Derek and Jessica were collecting family approval points, I was working 3 jobs to put myself through state university. I studied finance and business administration, spent my weekends in the library instead of at family barbecues, and graduated summa cum laude with plans that extended far beyond our small town's expectations. My career as a financial advisor started slowly, but I built a reputation for honesty and careful planning that attracted clients who valued substance over flash. Within 5 years, I had established my own practice and was earning more than I had ever dreamed possible. The irony was that my success seemed to create more distance between my family and me, not less. Family dinners became exercises in subtle criticism. Mom would ask when I planned to settle down, suggesting that my focus on career meant I was missing out on what really mattered. Dad would grunt approvingly when Derek talked about expanding the construction business, but change the subject when I mentioned helping clients plan for retirement or buying their first homes. The worst part was how they talked about my absence from family events. I missed gatherings because I was working building something meaningful, but they interpreted my absence as indifference. Derek became particularly skilled at making comments about family loyalty, and being there when people needed you always delivered with just enough edge to sting. 3 months ago, Dad had a heart attack. Not a massive one, thank goodness, but serious enough to require surgery and ongoing medical care. I immediately offered to help with expenses to arrange the best specialists to do whatever was needed. But Derek stepped in as the family coordinator, assuring everyone that he would handle all the arrangements and that Dad was getting the best possible care. That was when the invitations to family events stopped coming entirely. Jessica would post photos from Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and birthday parties that I learned about only through social media. When I called Mom to ask about the next gathering, she would claim they had decided to keep things small or that it had been a last-minute decision. The isolation hurt more than I wanted to admit. I threw myself deeper into work, traveled to conferences, and built professional relationships that felt more authentic than anything I had experienced with my own family in years. But late at night, I would scroll through those family photos and wonder what I had done to deserve being erased from their lives. So when Derek called last week with an invitation to the Thanksgiving dinner, I felt a surge of hope that maybe they had realized how petty the silent treatment had become. He sounded genuinely warm on the phone, explaining that Dad was doing much better and that the family wanted to celebrate having everyone together for the holidays. Um, we miss you, Brianna, he had said, and something in his voice made me believe him. This is important to Dad. You know how much family means to him. I offered to help with the arrangements, even suggested that I could cover the dinner costs as my contribution to bringing everyone together. Derek seemed touched by the gesture, thanking me for wanting to make the evening special and assuring me that he would handle all the details. Walking into Romano's tonight, I had imagined apologies, explanations, maybe even acknowledgement that they had been too hard on me for choosing a different path. Instead, I found myself staring at that corner table while my entire extended family watched Derek orchestrate my humiliation with the precision of someone who had been planning this moment for a very long time. But as I sat down at that tiny table, something Derek said to the server caught my attention. He leaned over and whispered, "Remember, everything goes on her card tonight. She specifically requested to pay for the whole family as her way of making up for being absent so much." My blood turned cold as I realized this was not spontaneous cruelty. This was a carefully planned trap, and I had walked right into it. From my corner table, I had a perfect view of the dynamics I had been excluded from for months. The main table buzzed with conversation and laughter, but as I listened more carefully, I began to understand that I was not just absent from this dinner. I was the entertainment. Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister, had always been the family gossip coordinator. Tonight, she was in her element stage, whispering loudly enough for me to hear every word. Some people think a fancy career makes them too important for family obligations, she announced, shooting meaningful glances in my direction. When my Harold was in the hospital last year, all my children dropped everything to be there. But I suppose when you care more about money than family priorities, get confused. Uncle Robert, Patricia's husband, joined in with the kind of chuckling commentary that men his age seemed to think was both wise and hilarious. Always said that girl was too big for her britches. Remember when she was in high school and thought she was smarter than everyone else? Some people never learn that book learning doesn't make you better than the people who raised you. What stung most was watching my cousins participate in the mockery. Marcus, my age, exactly had been my closest friend growing up. We had spent countless summer afternoons building forts in my backyard, sharing secrets and planning adventures that felt impossibly important at the time. When he graduated college with a degree in graphic design but no job prospects, I had called everyone I knew in marketing and advertising, until I found him an entry-level position at a firm downtown. That job had launched his career. He was now a creative director earning 6 figures, engaged to a lovely woman named Rachel, and living in a converted loft that he loved showing off on social media. But tonight, he would not even look at me. When his mother mentioned my name, he shook his head and muttered something about people who thought they were too good for family traditions. Derek's wife, Amanda, had positioned herself as the family's social media coordinator, which apparently meant documenting every moment of family gatherings for maximum online impact. I watched her carefully angle her phone camera to capture the warm, laughing faces around the main table while deliberately avoiding any shots that would include my corner table. Her Instagram captions, which I could see her typing in real time, told a story of perfect family harmony. "So grateful for these beautiful people," she wrote under a photo of the group raising their wine glasses in a toast. "Nothing matters more than family love and tradition." The servers seemed uncomfortable with the obvious exclusion, but they followed Derek's instructions without question. When they brought menus to the main table, I received a different version with notably higher prices, where the family table received complimentary appetizers and bread service. My corner was apparently exempt from such courtesies. Jessica caught my eye once during the first hour and offered a small, sad smile that might have been apologetic. But when I raised my hand slightly to wave, she quickly looked away and turned her attention to her children, who were coloring on kid-friendly placemats that had also not been offered to my table. The conversation at the main table grew bolder as the wine flowed. Aunt Patricia's voice carried clearly across the restaurant as she shared her theories about modern women who prioritized careers over family values. In my day, we understood that success meant raising good children and supporting our husbands. This idea that women need to prove themselves in business is just vanity disguised as independence. Derek nodded sagely, playing the role of concerned brother with Academy Award-worthy sincerity. "Some people confuse being busy with being important," he said loud enough to ensure I heard every word. "Real family loyalty means showing up when it matters, not writing checks from a distance." The cruelest moment came when my grandmother, Dad's mother, asked where I was sitting. Her eyesight was not what it used to be, and the restaurant's dim lighting made it difficult for her to see my corner table clearly. "Oh, Brianna chose to sit separately," Derek explained with theatrical concern. "She said she needed space to take some work calls during dinner. You know how important her business meetings are." Grandma Margaret looked confused and a little hurt. "But it's Thanksgiving. Surely her work can wait for family time." "Some priorities can't be changed, Grandma," Jessica chimed in, her voice carrying a note of resignation that suggested this was a long-standing family disappointment. "We've learned to work around Brianna's schedule when we can." I wanted to stand up and scream that none of this was true, that I had never asked to sit alone, that I had never prioritized work over family during holidays. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the growing realization that this elaborate theater had been performed before, that my family had been telling these stories about me for months or maybe years. As the second hour passed and the main courses arrived at both tables, I began to understand that tonight was not about reconciliation or even punishment for some imaginary slight. This was about establishing a narrative that would justify whatever Derek had planned for the evening's finale. And that was when I noticed him checking his watch and signaling to the server with a gesture that looked distinctly like someone preparing to execute the final phase of a carefully orchestrated plan. The server approached my corner table with an expression that mixed professional courtesy with obvious discomfort. In her hands was a leather folder containing what appeared to be a substantial bill, and her hesitation before speaking told me everything I needed to know about what was coming next. "Ms. Patterson?" she said quietly, clearly hoping to avoid drawing attention from the main table. "I wanted to review your evening's charges before processing payment. As per the arrangements made by your brother, the total for your party this evening comes to $4,347. My stomach dropped as I opened the folder and saw the itemized breakdown. 23 people, including children. Premium wine pairings for every adult. The most expensive entrees on the menu. Multiple appetizer courses, top-shelf cocktails, after-dinner cognac and dessert wine, even specialty mocktails for the kids that cost more than most restaurant entrees. But what truly shocked me was not just the total amount. It was the evidence of careful planning that the bill represented. Derek had not simply ordered expensive items on impulse. Every single selection had been chosen to maximize cost while maintaining plausible deniability. Who could argue with wanting the best for a family Thanksgiving celebration? I pulled out my phone and called the restaurant's main number, asking to speak with the manager. When he arrived at my table, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s with the diplomatic bearing that comes from years of handling delicate customer situations, I kept my voice low and professional. "Could you help me understand how my payment information was provided for tonight's reservation?" I asked. His expression grew uncomfortable. "Your brother provided your credit card information when he made the reservation last week. He explained that you had requested to cover the dinner as a gesture of appreciation for the family gathering. He also mentioned that you would prefer for the payment arrangements to remain private until the end of the evening. Did he provide written authorization for those charges? He did present documentation, yes, though I should mention that we found it somewhat unusual to process such a large pre-authorization without the cardholder being present. I felt the ground shifting beneath me as the scope of Derek's planning became clear. This was not a spontaneous decision to stick me with an expensive bill. This was a carefully constructed financial ambush that he had been orchestrating for over a week. Could you show me what documentation he provided? The manager excused himself and returned with a folder containing photocopies of what appeared to be a credit card authorization form with my signature. Except I had never signed any such document. The signature was close enough to mine to pass casual inspection, but different enough that I could identify at least 3 specific differences in letter formation and pen pressure. Sir, this is not my signature. I never authorized these charges, and I was not aware of any arrangement to pay for tonight's dinner beyond my own meal. His face went pale. Are you saying that this authorization was provided without your knowledge or consent? Before I could answer, I heard Derek's voice from the main table calling for more wine and asking the server to bring the premium dessert menu. He was not just continuing to order expensive items. He was accelerating the pace, as if trying to inflate the bill as much as possible before some predetermined deadline. How much additional ordering has occurred since I arrived? I asked. The manager consulted his notes. Approximately $800 in additional beverages and appetizers. Your brother mentioned that you had specifically requested they order freely, since this was your treat for the family. I realized that Derek was not just stealing my money. He was using my supposed generosity as license for the family to indulge in ways they would never normally allow themselves. They were ordering premium items and expensive wines because they believed I had specifically invited them to do so. But the manager's next revelation was the most disturbing of all. I should also mention that your brother has been a regular customer here for several months. He's hosted 3 similar family gatherings, each time with payment arrangements that became disputed afterward. In 2 cases, he claimed the bills were excessive and refused to pay portions of the charges. In the 3rd instance, he brought his elderly mother to dinner and then claimed she had dementia and could not legally authorize the charges she had supposedly agreed to cover. My hands were shaking as I processed this information. Derek had not targeted me specifically for tonight's humiliation. He had been systematically exploiting family members and using their love and trust as weapons against them. Is there security footage of tonight's pre-dinner meeting in your parking lot? Yes, we have cameras covering the entire exterior. Why do you ask? Because I suspect you'll find evidence that tonight's dinner conversation was rehearsed in advance. As if on cue, Derek's voice boomed across the restaurant. Brianna, we're all so grateful that you insisted on treating everyone tonight. This is exactly the kind of gesture that shows you're finally understanding what family means. The performance was flawless. His timing, his tone, even the way he gestured toward my corner table with what appeared to be genuine warmth and appreciation. If I had not known better, I might have believed that I actually had offered to pay and that the family was simply expressing heartfelt gratitude. But I did know better. And as I looked around the restaurant and saw other diners watching our table with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern, I realized that Derek had chosen this public venue very deliberately. He was counting on my embarrassment and desire to avoid a scene to ensure I would quietly pay the bill and accept the humiliation he had so carefully orchestrated. What Derek had not counted on was that 4 years of building a financial advisory practice had taught me quite a bit about recognizing fraud and protecting myself from financial manipulation. I smiled at the manager and said, I think we need to call the credit card company and the police. What Derek has done tonight is not a family prank. It's identity theft and credit card fraud. My mother had been watching the conversation with the restaurant manager from her seat at the main table, and I could see her growing agitation as she realized something was going wrong with Derek's carefully laid plans. When she finally stood up and walked over to my corner table, her expression was not one of concern for my welfare, but of irritation that I was not playing my assigned role in the evening's drama. "Brianna, what are you doing?" she asked in a harsh whisper, positioning herself between my table and the manager so that her body blocked other diners from seeing our conversation. "Derek went to a lot of trouble to arrange this dinner, and you're embarrassing the entire family by making a scene with the staff." I looked up at my mother, this woman who had raised me for 18 years, who had taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with homework and held me when I cried after teenage heartbreaks. The woman I had called every Sunday for the past 15 years, even when our conversations became strained and awkward. The woman who had given Derek my credit card information. "Mom, did you give Derek my credit card details?" Her face flushed, but she straightened her shoulders in the way she always did when she felt cornered. "Of course I did. He told me you wanted to pay for tonight's dinner as a way of apologizing to the family for being absent so much. He said you were too proud to ask directly, so you asked him to handle the arrangements. And you believed that. Why wouldn't I believe it? It's about time you stepped up for this family instead of always putting your career first. Derek handles everything for this family, Brianna. Everything. He takes care of your father's medical appointments. He organizes all our gatherings. He makes sure everyone stays connected. What do? You send a card on birthdays and show up when it's convenient for your schedule." Her voice was rising, and I could see family members at the main table turning to watch our conversation. Derek's face wore an expression of carefully manufactured concern, as if he was witnessing an unfortunate but predictable breakdown from his irresponsible sister. "Mom, I've been contributing $1,500 every month to Dad's medical expenses. I've been paying for Grandma Margaret's assisted living costs. I've been covering Jessica's children's private school tuition. Did Derek tell you about any of that?" The confusion that crossed her face was brief but unmistakable. "That's ridiculous. Derek handles all of your father's medical bills. He set up a family fund where everyone contributes according to their ability. You've never contributed a penny to your father's care." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, then handed it to her, showing the monthly transfers to accounts labeled Patterson Family Medical Fund and Margaret Patterson Care Account, an educational support fund. "Look at the dates, Mom. Look at the amounts. I've been sending these payments for over 2 years. She studied the screen with growing bewilderment, scrolling through months of consistent payments that totaled well over $30,000. "But Derek told us. He said you refused to help with family expenses. He said you claimed Dad should have planned better for retirement and that Grandma's care was not your responsibility. Derek has been lying to you. And more than that, he's been stealing from the family. These payments I've been making Derek has been collecting them and using them for his own purposes while telling you that I don't care about family obligations." My mother sank into the empty chair across from my corner table, her face pale as she began to understand the scope of Derek's deception. But why would he do that? He's been so devoted to taking care of everyone. He spends hours every week dealing with medical appointments and insurance companies and family coordination. Because he's been using that reputation as cover for stealing money and manipulating all of you. Mom, when was the last time you actually saw a medical bill or insurance statement for Dad's care? When was the last time you had direct contact with any of Dad's doctors? She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Derek always said it was easier if he handled everything directly. He said the doctors preferred dealing with one family contact person, and since he has power of attorney for medical decisions, does he have power of attorney for financial decisions too? Well, yes. Your father was so overwhelmed by all the paperwork after his heart attack, and Derek offered to handle everything so that your father could focus on recovery. I felt sick. Mom, Derek has been stealing from Dad's medical fund, lying to the family about my contributions and using his position as the responsible son to manipulate all of you. Tonight's dinner is not about family reconciliation. It's about humiliating me in public and tricking me into paying for an expensive gathering that he can then use as evidence that I'm finally contributing to family expenses. That's a terrible thing to say about your brother. It's a terrible thing for my brother to do to his family. She looked over at the main table, where Derek was holding court, telling some story that had the entire group laughing and nodding with approval. Amanda was taking more photos, capturing moments of family joy that would look perfect on social media. Jessica was helping her children with their dessert, while Trevor checked his phone for messages from his business partners. "He's always been so good to this family," she said quietly, but I could hear doubt creeping into her voice. "He's been good at looking like he's taking care of the family while actually exploiting everyone's trust and affection." Mom, I need you to think carefully about something. How many times has Derek asked you for money or financial information in the past year? How many documents has he asked Dad to sign? How many family expenses has he told you about that required contributions from everyone? The silence stretched between us as she processed these questions. Finally, she whispered, "He said your father's medical bills were much higher than insurance covered. He said the specialist treatments required payments up front. He said everyone in the family needed to contribute or Dad wouldn't get the care he needed." How much has Derek collected from the family for Dad's medical expenses? "I don't know exactly. He said it was better if he managed all the financial details so no one would have to worry about it." Mom, I think Derek has been using Dad's health scare to steal money from everyone in the family, and he's been using my supposed selfishness as justification for why everyone else needs to contribute more. She was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with her napkin while trying to maintain composure in the crowded restaurant. What should we do? Before I could answer, Derek appeared at our table with his signature concerned brother expression firmly in place. "Is everything okay over here? Mom, you look upset. Brianna, I hope you're not causing problems for the restaurant staff." My mother looked up at her eldest son, this man she had trusted to take care of family responsibilities, and for the first time, I saw her looking at him with something other than unconditional maternal pride. "Derek, we need to talk about Dad's medical expenses and the family contributions you've been collecting." Derek's face underwent a subtle transformation as he realized that his carefully constructed narrative was beginning to unravel. The concerned brother expression remained, but something harder flickered behind his eyes as he processed my mother's question about family financial contributions. "Of course we can talk about that, Mom," he said smoothly, settling into the third chair at my corner table with the confidence of someone who had prepared for this exact contingency. "But maybe this isn't the best time or place for a detailed financial discussion. We have the whole family here celebrating Thanksgiving, and Brianna seems to be creating unnecessary drama about routine family arrangements." Jessica must have been watching our table closely because she appeared moments later with her own expression of sisterly concern. She carried her wine glass and positioned herself standing beside Derek's chair, creating a unified front that made my corner table feel even more isolated. "What's going on?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer and disapproved of my role in whatever conflict was developing. "People at the main table are starting to notice that something's wrong." Derek gestured toward my phone, which still displayed the banking records I had shown our mother. "Brianna is making some very serious accusations about family financial management, and frankly, I'm hurt and confused by her suggestions that I've been anything other than completely transparent about Dad's medical expenses." Jessica leaned closer to look at my phone screen, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass as she scrolled through the payment history. These look like regular charitable donations or something. Brianna, are you trying to claim that sending money to some random accounts proves that you've been helping with Dad's care? Those aren't random accounts, Jessica. They're the family medical fund that Derek set up, the same fund he's been telling everyone I refuse to contribute to. Derek shook his head with theatrical sadness. Brianna, I think you're confused about how the family medical fund works. The account you've been sending money to is a general family emergency fund that we set up years ago. It's not specifically for Dad's medical expenses, and the amounts you've contributed, while appreciated, represent a tiny fraction of what the family actually needs for Dad's ongoing care. Jessica nodded in agreement, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with her children when explaining why they couldn't have candy for breakfast. Brianna Derek has been organizing monthly family meetings where we discuss Dad's medical needs and plan our financial contributions. You've been invited to every single meeting, but you always have some work conflict or travel commitment that prevents you from attending. What meetings? I've never been invited to any family financial meetings. Of course you have, Derek said with the kind of gentle exasperation that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. I've called you personally to invite you to every gathering. You always say you'll try to make it work, but then you send a text at the last minute explaining that something urgent came up with a client or a business trip got extended. My mother was looking between her 3 children with growing confusion, trying to reconcile conflicting versions of events that couldn't possibly both be true. Derek, I don't remember Brianna canceling family meetings. I remember you saying she wasn't interested in participating. Mom, you know how these conversations go, Jessica interjected. Brianna always has the best intentions, but her career always seems to take priority when push comes to shove. We've learned to plan around her schedule limitations instead of constantly being disappointed when she doesn't show up. Derek pulled out his own phone and began scrolling through what appeared to be text message conversations. I can show you the invitations I've sent and Brianna's responses if you'd like. I've saved them because, honestly, it's been hurtful to have my efforts to include her consistently rejected. He turned his phone screen toward our mother, displaying a conversation thread that showed him sending meeting invitations and receiving responses from my number, declining or requesting to reschedule. The messages were dated over the past 8 months and formed a clear pattern of Derek reaching out and me responding with work-related excuses. Except I had never sent those messages. Derek, I never received any of those invitations, and I never sent those responses. Come on, Brianna, Jessica said with a laugh that sounded more frustrated than amused. You can't seriously be claiming that Derek somehow fabricated an 8-month text conversation history. That's paranoid even for you. Derek's expression remained patient and concerned, but I caught a flash of something that might have been satisfaction as he watched me struggle to explain messages I had never sent from my own phone number. Look, he said, adopting the tone of someone trying to be reasonable in an unreasonable situation. I understand that you're feeling defensive about your level of family involvement, and I appreciate that you want to contribute more going forward. That's exactly why we plan tonight's dinner as an opportunity for you to make a meaningful gesture toward family unity. By tricking me into paying for an expensive meal I never agreed to cover. Jessica set down her wine glass with enough force to make it clink against the table. Nobody tricked you into anything, Brianna. Derek told the entire family that you had specifically requested to pay for tonight's dinner as your way of apologizing for missing so many family gatherings and contributing more substantially to family expenses. And you believed that. Why wouldn't we believe it? Derek asked. You make more money than the rest of us combined. You live alone with no dependents or major financial obligations. It makes perfect sense that you would want to use some of your resources to support the family, especially given how much help Dad needs right now. My mother was studying Derek's phone screen with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. These messages do look like they're from Brianna's number, she said slowly. But Brianna, you're saying you never sent them. Mom, someone has been sending text messages from my phone number without my knowledge. That's called spoofing, and it's a form of identity theft. Derek and Jessica exchanged a look that clearly communicated their shared belief that I was becoming increasingly irrational and desperate in my attempts to avoid taking responsibility for my family neglect. Brianna, Jessica said with the kind of forced patience that barely concealed growing anger, "We've been planning this intervention for months. Not an ambush or a trick, but a loving family intervention designed to help you understand how your choices have been affecting all of us." What kind of intervention involves credit card fraud and public humiliation? The kind that becomes necessary when someone consistently refuses to acknowledge their impact on the people who love them, Derek replied. "We tried having private conversations with you about family responsibilities and financial contributions. We tried including you in planning meetings and decision-making processes. We tried giving you space to come to these realizations on your own." Jessica nodded vigorously. "But you kept prioritizing your career over family obligations, kept making excuses about why you couldn't attend important gatherings, kept sending money to random accounts instead of participating in the family financial planning process that Derek has worked so hard to organize." So tonight is our way of giving you an opportunity to demonstrate that family actually matters to you, Derek concluded. "By covering the cost of this Thanksgiving dinner, you're showing everyone that you understand the importance of contributing meaningfully to family unity and Dad's ongoing care." The logic was so circular and manipulative that I felt dizzy trying to follow it. Derek had created a scenario where my attempts to contribute financially to the family were evidence of my failure to contribute properly, where my absence from meetings I was never invited to prove my lack of family commitment, and where my resistance to paying for a dinner I never agreed to fund demonstrated my selfishness and irresponsibility. But what made it truly insidious was how reasonable it all sounded when presented as a unified narrative by my siblings in front of our confused and emotional mother. "All we're asking," Jessica said softly, reaching across the table to touch my hand, "is that you step up for this family the way Derek has been stepping up for years. Pay for tonight's dinner, commit to attending the monthly family meetings, and start contributing regularly to Dad's medical fund according to your ability to help." Derek nodded solemnly. "We love you, Brianna, but love means holding each other accountable for being the best family members we can be. Tonight is your chance to show us that you're ready to be part of this family's future, instead of always finding reasons to stay on the outside." And that was when my phone rang with a call from my business partner, Sarah, whose timing was about to reveal just how deep Derek's deceptions actually ran. While Derek and Jessica maintained their intervention theater, I noticed my father had been quietly observing our corner table discussion from his seat at the main table. His expression was difficult to read, but there was something in his posture that suggested resignation rather than concern. When I caught his eye and gestured for him to join us, he approached slowly with the careful gait of someone who had learned to conserve energy since his cardiac event. "Dad, can you help clarify something for me? Derek says he's been handling all your medical expenses and that the family has been contributing to a fund for your care. Can you tell me about those arrangements?" William Patterson had always been a man of few words, someone who preferred action to explanation and who trusted others to handle details he found overwhelming. The heart attack had intensified these tendencies, making him even more reliant on Derek's willingness to manage complicated paperwork and coordinate with medical providers. "Derek takes care of everything," he said, simply settling into the fourth chair at our increasingly crowded corner table. "The doctors, the insurance, the bills. He told me not to worry about the money side of things, that he would work with the family to make sure everything got handled properly." "But Dad, have you actually seen the medical bills? Do you know how much your treatment has cost or what insurance has covered?" His face showed a flash of discomfort, the expression of someone being asked to think about details he had deliberately avoided. Derek shows me papers to sign when they need signatures. He explains what they're for. I trust him to handle it correctly. Jessica leaned forward with protective concern. Dad shouldn't have to stress about medical bills while he's recovering. That's exactly why Derek stepped up to coordinate everything with the family. What about the financial power of attorney documents, Dad? When did you sign those? William's confusion was evident. Derek brought some paperwork to the hospital right after my surgery. He said it was standard stuff that would make it easier for him to deal with the insurance companies and medical billing departments. I was pretty foggy from the medications, but he explained that it would just streamline the process. My mother reached across the table to take my father's hand. William, do you remember what specifically you signed? Was it just medical authorization, or did it include financial decision-making power? I don't know the difference, Helen. Derek said it was all routine paperwork that families do when someone has a serious health event. He said it would protect me from having to deal with phone calls and paperwork while I was trying to get better. Derek maintained his expression of patient concern, but I could see tension building around his eyes as this conversation continued. Dad, you know that everything I've done has been to make your recovery easier and to ensure you get the best possible care without financial stress. Of course, son, you've been wonderful through all of this. Dad, I said gently, Derek told the family that I've been refusing to help with your medical expenses. Is that true? William looked genuinely surprised. You've been refusing to help. Derek never told me that. Jessica and Derek exchanged another one of their meaningful looks before Derek responded. Dad, we didn't want to burden you with family financial drama while you're recovering. Brianna has been resistant to participating in the coordinated family support system we established. But she's here tonight paying for everyone's dinner, William said with obvious confusion. That doesn't sound like someone who's refusing to help the family. That's exactly right, Dad, Derek said smoothly. Tonight represents a real breakthrough in Brianna's willingness to contribute meaningfully to family needs. We're hoping it signals a new commitment to being present and supportive going forward. I watched my father process this explanation, and what I saw in his face was not relief or happiness about my supposed change of heart. It was the exhausted acceptance of someone who had learned not to ask too many questions about situations he didn't fully understand. Dad, can I ask you something specific about your medical treatment costs? Derek has been telling the family that your expenses are much higher than what insurance covers, and that everyone needs to contribute additional money to ensure you receive proper care. Is that true? William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I don't really know the details, Brianna. Derek handles all of that with the insurance people and the billing departments. He tells me not to worry about it. But you must receive some paperwork directly from the insurance company or the doctor's offices. Derek arranged for everything to be sent to his address so I wouldn't be overwhelmed by paperwork during recovery. He brings me summaries of what's important. My mother's grip on my father's hand tightened. William, don't you think you should see the actual medical bills and insurance statements? Derek interjected before my father could answer. Dad's cardiologist specifically recommended minimizing financial stress during the recovery period. That's standard medical advice for cardiac patients. Dad's job is to focus on his health and follow his treatment plan. My job is to make sure the administrative side gets handled properly. What about the family financial contributions? I asked. Dad, do you know how much money Derek has collected from relatives to help with your care? People have been generous, William said vaguely. Derek mentioned that family members have been helping out, which means a lot to your mother and me. Do you know specific amounts or which family members have contributed? Derek stood up abruptly, his patience finally showing signs of strain. Brianna, these kinds of detailed financial questions are exactly the kind of stress that Dad's medical team wants him to avoid. This is why we have a family coordinator handling these matters, instead of overwhelming Dad with paperwork and decision-making that could impact his recovery. But something in Derek's quick intervention seemed to trigger a memory in my father's mind. Actually, Derek, I've been meaning to ask you about something. Last week, when you brought those papers for me to sign, one of them looked like it might have been related to the construction business. You said it was medical paperwork, but the letterhead looked familiar. The silence that followed this observation was thick with tension. Derek's carefully maintained composure flickered for just a moment before he recovered his concerned brother expression. Dad, you were pretty tired that day, and some of the insurance authorization forms use legal language that can look like business documents. Everything I brought you was related to your medical care and recovery support. William nodded slowly, but I could see doubt forming in his expression. Maybe you could bring me copies of everything I've signed over the past few months. I'd like to review it all when I'm feeling more alert. Of course, Dad. Though I should mention that some of the documents are currently with various insurance companies and medical providers for processing, but I can definitely get you copies of everything once the current round of authorizations is complete. Jessica jumped in to support Derek's explanation. That makes sense. Insurance paperwork is so confusing even when you're feeling completely healthy. The important thing is that Dad's getting excellent care and the family is working together to support his recovery. But I could see something changing in my father's demeanor as he processed the various explanations he was hearing. The man who had built a successful construction business over 30 years had not achieved that success by accepting vague explanations about important documents and financial arrangements. Derek, he said slowly, I think I'd like to start receiving the medical bills and insurance statements directly again. I appreciate everything you've done to help, but I'm feeling strong enough now to handle reviewing my own paperwork. The flash of panic that crossed Derek's face lasted only a split second, but it was unmistakable to anyone who was watching closely. And suddenly, I realized that my father's heart attack had not been caused by the stress of worrying about medical bills or family financial pressures. It had been caused by discovering something about Derek's management of the family construction business that was serious enough to put a 62-year-old man in the cardiac unit. Word of the developing confrontation at our corner table had begun to spread through the main family gathering, and what started as curious glances had evolved into something more predatory. Extended family members began approaching our table in small groups, each carrying their own grievances and expectations that Derek had apparently been cultivating for months. Aunt Patricia was the first to make her move, approaching with the righteous confidence of someone who believed she was about to deliver justice to a long overdue target. Uncle Robert followed closely behind, carrying his wineglass like a prop in the performance they were about to deliver. Brianna, honey. Patricia began with the kind of false sweetness that women her age wielded like a scalpel. Robert and I have been talking, and we think this is a perfect opportunity for you to address some things that have been bothering the family for quite a while now. Robert nodded gravely, positioning himself to block any easy escape route from our corner table. Your aunt and I have contributed to your father's medical fund every month since his heart attack, even though our own retirement income is limited. We've done it out of family loyalty and love. Which makes it particularly hurtful, Patricia continued, when Derek tells us that you've been refusing to participate in the family financial planning meetings or contribute meaningfully to your father's care. We've been wondering what could be more important than your own father's health. Jessica gestured toward the approaching family members with the satisfaction of someone whose position was being validated by reinforcements. See, Brianna, it's not just Derek and me who've noticed your absence from family responsibilities. Everyone has been affected by your choices. More relatives were gathering, now drawn by the promise of witnessing what appeared to be a long overdue family intervention. Cousin Marcus approached with his fiancée Rachel, both carrying the slightly flushed expressions of people who had been enjoying the premium wine selection and were now ready to participate in whatever drama was unfolding. Brianna, Marcus said, with the pompous authority of someone who had forgotten that his career success was directly attributable to my professional networking. Rachel and I were just discussing how important it is for families to support each other through difficult times. We've been contributing to Uncle William's medical fund, and we were honestly shocked to learn that you haven't been participating. Rachel, who had met the family exactly 3 times before tonight, nodded with the enthusiasm of someone eager to demonstrate her understanding of family values. Marcus told me how devoted Derek has been to coordinating everyone's contributions and making sure Uncle William gets the best possible care. It's really admirable how he's stepped up to handle such a complex responsibility. Uncle Robert raised his wine glass in a gesture that was part toast and part accusation. Derek has been the backbone of this family's response to William's health crisis. He's organized everything, coordinated with all the medical providers, and made sure that everyone understands their role in supporting the family through this difficult time. Which is why it's so disappointing, Patricia added with theatrical sadness, when someone chooses to prioritize their career over their family's needs. We understand that some people get busy with work, but family should always come first. Derek stood beside our corner table like a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of family disapproval, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey humble acceptance of their praise, while maintaining concern for my emotional state during this difficult but necessary confrontation. "I appreciate everyone's support," he said, with the kind of gracious modesty that made him seem even more admirable by comparison to my supposed selfishness. But tonight is about giving Brianna an opportunity to step up and show that she wants to be part of the family's future. Covering tonight's dinner is her way of demonstrating that commitment. More family members had joined the gathering around our corner table. Jessica's children were watching the adult drama with wide eyes, while Trevor stood protectively behind his wife, ready to support whatever position she took. Amanda continued documenting everything with her phone, apparently having decided that this family intervention would make compelling social media content. Cousin Jennifer, Patricia's youngest daughter, approached with her husband Kevin and their 2 teenagers. "Brianna, we've been trying to understand your perspective on family obligations, and honestly, it's been difficult. When family members need help, we all pitch in according to our ability. That's what family means." Kevin, who worked as a mechanic and had never earned more than $40,000 in any given year, crossed his arms and delivered his judgment with the confidence of someone who believed financial success created moral obligations. People with more resources have more responsibility to take care of family members who need help. That's just basic human decency. The teenagers, 16 and 14 years old, watched their parents participate in the public shaming of their cousin with expressions that mixed fascination and discomfort. They had been raised to respect family loyalty above almost everything else, but something about the coordinated nature of this confrontation seemed to make them uneasy. Uncle Robert expanded on Kevin's theme with the kind of philosophical generosity that men his age displayed when discussing other people's money. When you're blessed with financial success, you have an obligation to share that blessing with family members who might be struggling. Hoarding wealth while your own father needs medical care is just morally wrong. Especially, Patricia added, with building momentum when your brother has been sacrificing his own time and energy to coordinate everyone else's contributions and manage all the administrative work that your father can't handle during his recovery. Derek accepted this praise with the kind of humble gratitude that made him appear even more saintly. "I don't do it for recognition. I do it because Dad needs our help and families take care of each other. But it would mean so much to have Brianna finally participating in our coordinated support system, instead of always finding reasons why she can't contribute." Marcus stepped closer to our table, his voice carrying the authority of someone delivering a final verdict. "Brianna, we're all here tonight because we care about you, and we want you to understand how your choices have been affecting the people who love you. This isn't an attack. This is an intervention motivated by love and concern." Rachel nodded enthusiastically. Family relationships require investment from everyone. You can't just show up when it's convenient and expect people to welcome you back without addressing the hurt you've caused. What struck me most about this coordinated performance was not its cruelty, though it was certainly cruel. It was its sophistication. Derek had spent months preparing these people to deliver these specific messages at this specific moment. He had carefully cultivated their sense of righteousness, their belief in their own moral superiority, and their conviction that I deserved whatever humiliation they were about to witness. But Derek had made one critical miscalculation in his elaborate planning. As the family continued their intervention, my phone continued to ring with the call from my business partner, Sarah. And when I finally answered that call in front of all these witnesses, Derek's carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse in the most spectacular way possible. "Sarah," I said, putting the phone on speaker so everyone could hear, "I'm in the middle of a family dinner, but something's happened that I think you need to know about." Derek's face went pale as he realized that his weeks of planning had not accounted for the possibility that the outside world might intrude on his perfectly orchestrated family drama. While the extended family continued their coordinated intervention around our corner table, the restaurant manager returned with information that would fundamentally change everyone's understanding of the evening's events. His expression was grave as he approached, carrying a folder that clearly contained more than routine paperwork. "Ms. Patterson, I apologize for interrupting your family gathering, but there are some irregularities with tonight's payment authorization that require immediate attention." Derek's confident orchestration of the family confrontation faltered as the manager's professional tone cut through the emotional drama he had been so carefully directing. "Is there a problem with the credit card processing? I'm sure we can resolve any technical issues quickly." "The issue is not technical, sir. It's procedural and potentially legal." The manager opened his folder and removed several documents. "Ms. Patterson, when you questioned the payment authorization earlier, I conducted a more thorough review of our records regarding your brother's dining history with us." Uncle Robert stepped closer, still carrying his wine glass and apparently assuming this was simply another administrative detail in Derek's responsible handling of family arrangements. "Derek's been handling family gatherings here for months. He's one of your best customers." "Actually, sir, that's part of the problem." The manager's diplomatic training was evident as he navigated between professional obligation and family sensitivity. "Your brother has been a regular customer, but there have been recurring issues with payment arrangements and disputed charges that have created concerns about fraudulent activity." Patricia's voice carried the sharp edge of someone whose righteous indignation was being interrupted by inconvenient facts. What kind of concerns? Derek has been nothing but responsible about organizing these family dinners. The manager consulted his notes with the careful precision of someone who understood that every word would be scrutinized. "Over the past 8 months, your brother has organized 4 family gatherings at our restaurant. In each case, he presented payment authorization from elderly family members or relatives who were not present during the reservation process." Jessica moved closer to Derek in a gesture of support, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. Those were legitimate family gatherings where relatives offered to cover the expenses. There's nothing unusual about that. "The pattern that concerns us," the manager continued, "is what happened after each gathering. In 2 cases, the alleged authorizing party contacted us the following day to dispute the charges, claiming they had never agreed to pay for the events. In the 3rd case, your brother returned personally to contest portions of the bill, claiming the charges were excessive and demanding itemized justification for every expense." Marcus stepped forward with the defensive loyalty of someone whose own moral position was beginning to feel less secure. Maybe there were just misunderstandings about the payment arrangements. Family financial coordination can get complicated. Perhaps, but there's additional information that makes these incidents more concerning. The manager removed another document from his folder, We have security camera footage from tonight's gathering that shows your brother meeting with family members in our parking lot before the dinner began. The footage clearly shows him providing what appears to be written instructions and coaching the group on specific talking points. The silence that followed this revelation was profound. 23 family members who had been participating in what they believed was a spontaneous intervention suddenly realized they had been recruited as unwitting performers in Derek's carefully scripted drama. Derek's face had gone from pale to flushed as he recognized that his months of careful planning were unraveling in real time. Family gatherings require coordination. I was simply making sure everyone understood the evening's arrangements and ensuring that Dad wouldn't be stressed by complicated logistics. The concerning element, the manager replied, is that our security footage shows you distributing what appear to be prepared talking points and practicing specific confrontational scenarios with various family members. This suggests premeditation that extends beyond routine event coordination. Uncle Robert set down his wineglass with a sharp click against the table surface. Derek, what is he talking about? What kind of talking points? Before Derek could respond, the manager continued his revelation. Additionally, we've discovered that the credit card authorization form presented for tonight's dinner contains a forged signature. We've compared it to Ms. Patterson's signature from her driver's license and credit card, and there are clear differences in letter formation and pen pressure that indicate fraudulent documentation. Amanda stopped taking photos, her phone lowering to her side as she stared at her husband with growing alarm. The social media documentation of their perfect family gathering had suddenly become potential evidence in a fraud investigation. Furthermore, the manager added, we're legally required to report suspected credit card fraud to the issuing bank and local law enforcement. The combination of forged authorization documents, disputed payment history, and evidence of premeditated deception creates a pattern that meets the legal definition of identity theft and wire fraud. Jennifer's husband Kevin stepped back from our table as if distance could protect him from association with whatever Derek had orchestrated. Derek, please tell me you didn't actually forge Brianna's signature on credit card documents. Jessica's protective stance beside Derek began to waver as the implications of the manager's revelations settled in. Derek, you said Brianna asked you to handle the payment arrangements. You said she specifically wanted to cover tonight's dinner as her contribution to the family. She did want to contribute, Derek said, but his voice lacked the confident authority he had displayed throughout the evening. I was simply handling the administrative details to make the process easier for everyone involved. My mother looked up from the credit card authorization documents the manager had placed on our table. Derek, this signature doesn't look like Brianna's handwriting. The letters are formed completely differently. Sometimes people's signatures vary depending on the pen they use or how quickly they're writing, Derek replied, but his explanation sounded weak even to his own ears. The manager's next revelation was the most damaging of all. There's one additional concern that we're obligated to report. Our review of previous disputed charges involving your brother revealed a pattern of targeting elderly family members and relatives with limited financial literacy. This type of systematic family exploitation is considered elder financial abuse under federal law. Grandma Margaret, who had been watching the confrontation with growing confusion, suddenly spoke up with the clarity that sometimes emerges when elderly people finally understand they've been victimized. Derek, you told me I needed to sign papers to help with William's medical expenses. You said the family was coordinating contributions and that I needed to authorize my portion of the support fund. Derek's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. Grandma, those were legitimate family financial coordination documents. Everything I've done has been to help the family support Dad's medical care and maintain family unity. But the restaurant manager's final revelation destroyed any remaining credibility Derek might have maintained. Sir, we've been contacted by a federal task force that's been investigating systematic elder financial abuse in our area. Your name and pattern of activity match an ongoing investigation into construction industry fraud involving family manipulation and identity theft. Federal agents are already en route to this location. The sound of approaching sirens could be heard through the restaurant's windows, confirming that Derek's elaborate family intervention had become something entirely different from what he had planned. As the family absorbed the restaurant manager's revelations about Derek's fraudulent activities, my phone rang again with the call from Sarah that I had been trying to answer throughout the evening's drama. This time, with federal agents reportedly en route and Derek's credibility completely destroyed, I answered the call on speakerphone so everyone could hear what my business partner had discovered. "Brianna, thank God you're answering. I've been trying to reach you for hours because we have a serious problem that affects both our business and your family." The family members gathered around our corner table fell silent as they realized that whatever Sarah had to say was going to add another layer to the evening's unfolding crisis. "Sarah, I'm at a family dinner that's turned into something of a nightmare. Derek has been lying to the family about financial matters, and we just discovered he's been committing credit card fraud. What's your emergency?" "It's related to your brother's construction company. Remember how he approached our firm last month asking about a potential investment opportunity? Well, after you told me to decline his proposal, I decided to do some background research just to protect our business from any future solicitations." Derek's face went white as he realized that his financial schemes had intersected with my professional network in ways he had never anticipated. "What did you find?" I asked, though Derek's expression already suggested the answer would be devastating. "Patterson Construction is in complete financial collapse. The company is 3 months behind on payroll, facing 14 separate lawsuits from suppliers and subcontractors, and about to lose its business license due to outstanding tax obligations. But that's not the worst part." Jessica grabbed Derek's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Derek, is that true? Is the business failing?" "The worst part," Sarah continued before Derek could respond, "is that your brother has been using falsified documents, claiming that you're a business partner and financial guarantor to secure loans and lines of credit across the city. He's essentially been using your reputation and credit history to prop up his failing business while hiding the company's true financial condition from creditors." Marcus stepped closer to our table, his face pale as he processed the implications. "Derek, I referred 3 of my clients to Patterson Construction for home renovation projects. Are you telling me they're not going to get their work completed?" Sarah's voice through the phone speaker was grim. "It's worse than incomplete work. Patterson Construction has been collecting substantial down payments for projects they don't have the resources to complete, then using that money to pay older debts while promising clients their work will begin soon. It's essentially a Ponzi scheme disguised as a construction business." Uncle Robert's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the restaurant floor, the crash punctuating the horror of these revelations. "Derek, we've been telling everyone in our neighborhood to hire Patterson Construction. Robert's brother-in-law just gave you $15,000 to start his kitchen renovation next month." The federal investigation that the restaurant manager mentioned isn't just about credit card fraud, Sarah explained. It's part of a larger task force investigating construction industry fraud that's been systematically targeting working-class families and elderly homeowners with promises of affordable renovations that never get completed. Amanda was staring at her husband with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Derek, you told me the business was expanding. You said we were going to buy a bigger house next year because contracts were increasing." Derek's voice was barely audible as he tried to maintain some version of his carefully constructed lies. "The business has had some cash flow challenges, but that's normal in construction. I've been working with financial partners to secure additional capital and stabilize operations." "By financial partners," Sarah continued relentlessly, "he means using forged documents with Brianna's information to convince banks and private lenders that she's backing his business ventures." I've found evidence of at least 6 different loan applications where he's listed Brianna as a co-signer or business guarantor without her knowledge or consent. Jennifer's teenage daughter, who had been watching the adult drama with fascination, suddenly spoke up with the clarity that young people sometimes bring to complicated situations. So Uncle Derek has been stealing from Grandpa William, lying about Aunt Brianna, stealing from his construction customers, and using Aunt Brianna's name to get loans he can't pay back. The simple summary from a 16-year-old girl cut through all of Derek's elaborate justifications and exposed the criminal enterprise he had been operating under the cover of being the responsible family leader. That's exactly right, Sarah confirmed. And the reason I've been trying to reach Brianna urgently is that one of the banks he's defrauded is planning to file criminal charges on Monday morning. They've been investigating for weeks and discovered the pattern of identity theft involving Brianna's personal and business information. My father had been sitting quietly throughout these revelations, but now he spoke with the kind of authority he had once used to run a successful business, before his health crisis allowed Derek to manipulate family dynamics. Derek, is this why you wanted me to sign all those papers while I was recovering from surgery? Were you using my medical situation to steal money from the family and cover up your business failures? Derek's silence was more damning than any confession could have been. Dad, I said gently, I think Derek caused your heart attack in the first place. I think you discovered something about the business finances that was so shocking it triggered your cardiac event, and Derek has been using your recovery period to cover up his crimes and manipulate the family into believing I was the problem. William Patterson closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them, they were filled with the kind of pain that comes from realizing someone you trusted completely has betrayed everything you built together. Derek brought me financial statements showing that the business was losing money because we were supporting too many family members on the payroll and contributing too much to community projects. He said we needed to make difficult decisions about cutting family support and reducing our charitable giving, but something about the numbers didn't make sense. What didn't make sense, Dad? The revenue figures were much lower than what I remembered from our actual contracts. When I started asking questions about specific projects and customer payments, Derek got angry and accused me of not trusting him to run the business properly. That's when I had the heart attack, right there in the office while we were arguing about missing money. The pieces of Derek's elaborate deception were finally coming together in a complete picture that revealed years of systematic family manipulation designed to cover up criminal activity and business incompetence. As the sound of sirens grew louder outside the restaurant, I realized that Derek's plan to humiliate me into becoming the family's permanent financial resource had instead exposed him as the predator who had been exploiting all of us for longer than anyone had imagined. But the final twist was still to come. As Amanda continued to document the evening's events with her phone completely unaware that she was creating evidence for a federal investigation, her social media posts about our perfect family Thanksgiving began generating responses that revealed just how widely Derek's deceptive practices had spread throughout our community. Her Instagram story, which had started with cheerful photos of elegantly plated dinners and family laughter, now showed a table full of shocked faces and federal agents entering the restaurant. But it was the comments section that truly exposed the scope of Derek's criminal enterprise. The first response came from Linda Morrison, whose profile picture showed her standing in front of a half-completed kitchen renovation. Amanda, please tell me this isn't the same Derek Patterson who took our deposit for a bathroom remodel 6 months ago and then stopped returning our calls. Within minutes, other comments began appearing with alarming frequency. Tom Bradley wrote, "Is this Patterson construction Derek? He owes my elderly father $12,000 for a roof repair that was never finished. Dad's been trying to reach him for weeks." Sarah Chen posted a longer comment that made Amanda's face go pale as she read it aloud. Derek promised my family that Patterson Construction would complete our basement renovation before my daughter's graduation party. He collected $8,000 upfront and then disappeared. When we drove to the business address, we found an empty office with an eviction notice on the door. The comments multiplied as word spread through our local community's social media networks. Maria Santos shared her story. Derek convinced my grandmother to pay for a complete home accessibility renovation after her stroke. She gave him $15,000 from her insurance settlement, and he's done maybe 2 days of work in 3 months. She's been living without a functioning bathroom because he ripped out the old fixtures but never installed the promised replacements. Amanda tried deleting the posts, but screenshots had already been captured and shared by people who recognized Derek's name and wanted to warn others about his business practices. The viral spread of information was faster than her ability to control the narrative. Kevin Rodriguez, who worked at the bank where Derek had attempted several fraudulent loan applications, commented with information that made my blood run cold. Patterson has been trying to get business loans using forged co-signer documentation for months. Bank security flagged his applications because the financial references kept pointing back to people who had no knowledge of his loan requests. But the most devastating comment came from elderly neighbor Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, whose grandson had helped her set up a Facebook account specifically so she could warn other seniors about Derek's tactics. Derek Patterson convinced me to refinance my home to pay for repairs that were never completed. He told me it was a special program for seniors and that his sister Brianna had recommended me for a priority service. I trusted him because he seemed so caring about family values. Amanda was crying now as she scrolled through dozens of similar stories from people across our community who had been victimized by Derek's systematic fraud. The man she had married, the father of her children, the person she had believed was a devoted family leader, was actually a serial predator who had been targeting vulnerable people throughout our area. One comment thread revealed the existence of a private Facebook group called Patterson Construction Victims that had been documenting Derek's crimes for months while trying to coordinate with law enforcement. The group had over 40 members, representing families who had collectively lost more than $200,000 to Derek's fraudulent business practices. Jessica read one of the group posts aloud with horror. Derek's pattern is always the same. He targets elderly homeowners, single mothers, and families dealing with medical emergencies or insurance claims. He presents himself as a family man who understands their struggles, collects substantial deposits for urgent repairs, and then disappears once he has their money. The group had been working with a private investigator hired by several of the victims, and their research had uncovered evidence that Derek had been operating similar schemes in 2 neighboring counties under slightly different business names. The scope of his criminal enterprise extended far beyond anything our family had imagined. Marcus pulled out his own phone and began reading comments from people he recognized from our local community. Derek approached the Johnson family after their house fire last year. He convinced them he could help with insurance reconstruction and took $30,000 for materials that were never delivered. They've been living in a hotel for 8 months because their insurance won't pay additional contractors until Derek refunds the money he stole. The social media evidence was creating a real-time map of Derek's victims that extended throughout our county and beyond. Each new comment revealed another family whose trust had been betrayed, another elderly person whose life savings had been stolen, another single mother whose children were living in unsafe conditions because Derek had taken their money without completing promised repairs. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came when Amanda's own mother commented on the Instagram post, "Amanda, honey, I didn't know Derek was having business troubles. He approached me last month about investing in Patterson Construction's expansion. He said the family business was growing rapidly and offered guaranteed returns that seemed too good to be true. Amanda stared at her phone screen in disbelief. Derek asked my mother for investment money. She's retired and living on Social Security. The comment thread revealed that Derek had been systematically approaching the extended family members and in-laws of his victims, using his relationship with them as evidence of his trustworthiness, while soliciting additional investments that he claimed would help expand the business and fulfill his existing obligations. Jennifer's husband, Kevin, discovered that Derek had contacted his elderly father about a family investment opportunity just 2 weeks earlier. He told Dad that family members were pooling money to help Patterson Construction secure a major municipal contract that would provide steady income for years. Dad was going to invest his entire pension distribution. The federal agents who had arrived at the restaurant were now interviewing witnesses while reviewing the social media evidence that Amanda had inadvertently created. The Instagram posts and comment threads provided a comprehensive record of Derek's victims and their stories, creating a digital paper trail that would be invaluable in prosecuting his crimes. As I watched Derek's elaborate facade crumble in real time through social media exposure, I realized that his plan to humiliate me had instead created the perfect storm that would finally bring justice to the dozens of families he had victimized through his manipulative schemes. But the most shocking revelation was still ahead, hidden in a private message that Amanda received from someone who had been watching Derek's activities much more closely than any of us had realized. As federal agents began interviewing family members and collecting evidence at our corner table, my phone rang with a call from my credit card company's fraud prevention department. The timing was not coincidental. They had been monitoring Derek's attempts to use my financial information and had been building their own case against him for months. Ms. Patterson, this is Detective Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit working in coordination with your credit card company's security department. We've been investigating your brother's fraudulent activities as a part of a larger task force targeting systematic financial abuse. I put the call on speakerphone so the federal agents could hear the conversation, and Derek's face went gray as he realized that law enforcement had been watching his activities far longer than he had imagined. We've documented over 30 separate instances where your brother attempted to use your credit card information without authorization. Tonight's restaurant incident was actually the least sophisticated of his schemes. He's been using your personal and business information to apply for credit lines, business loans, and equipment financing across 3 counties. Derek made one last attempt to maintain his innocence. Those were legitimate family financial coordination efforts. Brianna knew about the business applications that included her information. Detective Martinez's response crushed any remaining hope Derek might have had. Sir, we have recorded phone calls of you providing Ms. Patterson's social security number, mother's maiden name, and financial references to lenders, while specifically claiming to be acting on her behalf. Those recordings will be entered as evidence in your prosecution for identity theft and wire fraud. The credit card company's investigation had uncovered the sophisticated scope of Derek's criminal enterprise. He had not simply been forging signatures or making unauthorized charges. He had been systematically stealing identities from multiple family members to create an elaborate network of fraudulent financial applications. Ms. Patterson, we've also discovered that your brother has been intercepting your mail and redirecting financial communications to an address he controls. He's been opening credit card accounts in your name, applying for business loans using your credit history, and even filing fraudulent tax documents claiming you as a business partner in his construction company. My mother gasped as she realized the implications. Derek, have you been stealing Brianna's mail? Is that how you got her financial information? The mail interception is how he obtained detailed knowledge of her banking relationships, investment accounts, and credit history, Detective Martinez explained. He's been using that information to create extremely convincing loan applications that would have been difficult for financial institutions to identify as fraudulent. Jessica was staring at Derek with complete horror. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been stealing from Brianna and lying to all of us? Our investigation traces the first fraudulent applications back approximately 18 months. The detective continued. The pattern escalated significantly after your father's heart attack, when your brother gained access to additional family financial information through his power of attorney arrangements. Uncle Robert stepped away from our table as if Derek's criminality might be contagious. Derek, you used Dad's medical emergency as an opportunity to steal from the family. Detective Martinez's revelation grew even more damaging. The construction business has been insolvent for over 2 years. Your brother has been using fraudulent loan proceeds to maintain the appearance of business operations while systematically stealing from customers, employees, and family members. The heart attack your father experienced was likely triggered by discovering evidence of the business fraud. William's voice was barely audible as he confirmed the detective's theory. I found discrepancies in the business accounts that showed money being transferred to personal accounts that Derek had opened without my knowledge. When I confronted him about the unauthorized transfers, he became angry and accused me of not trusting him to run the business properly. That's when the chest pains started. Your father's discovery of the business fraud threatened to expose the entire criminal enterprise, Detective Martinez explained. Your brother used your father's subsequent medical crisis to isolate him from financial information and manipulate the family into believing that medical expenses were the source of financial pressure rather than systematic theft. Amanda was reading through her phone with growing alarm as more victims of Derek's crimes continued to comment on her social media posts. Derek, Mrs. Henderson from our church, says you convinced her to remortgage her house to pay for foundation repairs that were never completed. She's 92 years old. The targeting of elderly victims is what brought federal attention to your brother's activities, the detective continued. Elder financial abuse carries severe penalties under federal law, particularly when it involves interstate fraud and systematic targeting of vulnerable populations. Marcus was pacing behind our table, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Derek, I referred dozens of people to Patterson Construction. My friends, my colleagues, my neighbors. They trusted you because I vouched for your character. The referral network is another element of the federal investigation, Detective Martinez explained. Your brother has been using family relationships and community connections to build credibility with potential victims. The systematic exploitation of trust relationships is considered aggravated fraud under federal sentencing guidelines. Derek's criminal enterprise had been far more sophisticated and extensive than any of us had realized. He had not simply been stealing money or lying about family financial contributions. He had been operating what amounted to organized crime disguised as family responsibility and business leadership. Ms. Patterson, the credit card company, will be reversing all unauthorized charges associated with tonight's dinner and previous fraudulent transactions. However, you'll need to work with federal prosecutors to address the identity theft and loan fraud that occurred over the past 18 months. Jennifer's teenage daughter spoke up again with the brutal honesty that adolescents sometimes bring to adult situations. So Uncle Derek has been stealing from everyone in the family, lying about Aunt Brianna, stealing from his customers, and using everyone's trust to commit crimes against old people. That's an accurate summary, Detective Martinez confirmed. Your uncle's criminal activities represent one of the most extensive family-based fraud schemes we've investigated in this jurisdiction. As Derek was formally arrested and read his rights, I realized that his elaborate plan to humiliate me into becoming the family's financial provider had instead exposed him as the predator who had been systematically victimizing all of us, while hiding behind a carefully constructed image of family devotion and business success. But the investigation was about to reveal one final twist that would complete the picture of Derek's betrayal in the most shocking way possible. As Derek was handcuffed and led away by federal agents, the remaining family members sat in stunned silence around our corner table, processing the complete destruction of everything they had believed about family dynamics, financial responsibilities, and Derek's character. The restaurant had been cleared of other diners, and we found ourselves alone with our shattered assumptions and the evidence of systematic manipulation that had been controlling our relationships for years. Uncle Robert was the first to speak, his voice hollow with the realization of how completely he had been deceived. "I gave Derek $3,000 last month for William's medical expenses. He said the family fund was short and that everyone needed to contribute extra to make sure William received proper care." Patricia pulled out her own phone and began scrolling through text messages with growing horror. "Derek has been asking me for money every month since William's heart attack. He said Brianna was refusing to help and that the extended family needed to step up to cover her share of the medical expenses." Jessica was crying now, not just for Derek's betrayal, but for her own role in perpetuating his lies. "I believed everything he told me about Brianna. I actually thought she was selfish and uncaring. I helped him convince other family members that she was the problem." My mother's voice was barely a whisper as she processed the scope of Derek's manipulation. "He showed me fake bank statements claiming that Brianna had refused to contribute to your father's care. He said she told him that Dad should have planned better for retirement and that family medical expenses were not her responsibility." "Those statements were completely fabricated," I said gently. "I've been contributing $1,500 every month to Dad's medical fund, plus additional amounts for Grandma's care and Jessica's children's education. Derek has been intercepting those contributions and using them for his own purposes while telling all of you that I refused to help." Marcus sat down heavily, his face pale with shame and realization. "Brianna, Derek told me you said I was ungrateful for the job referral you gave me years ago. He said you complained that family members were always asking for favors and never appreciating your help. I believed him and started avoiding you at family gatherings." "I never said anything like that, Marcus. I was proud to help you get that job, and I've always been glad to see your career success." Kevin was reviewing his own text message conversations with Derek, discovering months of manipulation and lies. "Derek told me that Brianna thought our family was beneath her social status now that she was successful. He said she made comments about not wanting to associate with people who didn't have college educations or professional careers." "That's absolutely not true. I've never thought anything like that about any of you." Jennifer's husband shook his head with disgust. "Derek has been playing all of us against each other for years. He convinced everyone that Brianna was the source of family problems, while he was actually the one stealing from all of us." Grandma Margaret, who had been quietly listening to these revelations, suddenly spoke with the clarity that sometimes emerges when elderly people finally understand they've been victimized. "Derek has been visiting me twice a week since William's heart attack. He said the family needed my help to cover medical expenses and that everyone else was contributing according to their ability." "How much money did you give him, Grandma?" "I've been writing checks for $800 every month. Derek said it was going into a family medical fund that would ensure William received the best possible care." Her voice broke as she realized the magnitude of her exploitation. "I've been living on crackers and soup to afford those payments because I wanted to help my son." The cruelty of Derek's manipulation was breathtaking. He had convinced our 87-year-old grandmother to sacrifice her own nutrition and comfort to fund his criminal lifestyle while telling her it was necessary to save her son's life. Jessica was reviewing her own financial records with growing alarm. "Derek convinced me to redirect the children's education fund contributions. He said Brianna had offered to handle their private school tuition directly and that I should send my monthly education savings to the family medical fund instead. But I never received any education fund transfers from you. I've been paying for their tuition from my own accounts because I thought you were having financial difficulties." So Derek has been collecting my children's education money while you've been paying their actual school costs. That means he's been double billing their education expenses. Uncle Robert was calculating numbers on his phone with the methodical horror of someone discovering the scope of systematic theft. If Derek has been collecting monthly payments from Patricia and me, plus Grandma Margaret, plus Jessica, plus who knows how many other family members, while also intercepting Brianna's contributions and stealing from his construction customers, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. The federal investigator mentioned that Patterson construction customers have lost over $200,000. I confirmed, but the family manipulation probably represents another 100,000 in stolen contributions over the past 2 years. Amanda, who had been silent since Derek's arrest, finally spoke with the voice of someone whose entire life had been revealed as an elaborate lie. Derek told me his construction business was expanding rapidly. He said we were going to buy a bigger house, take expensive vacations, and put the children in private schools because contracts were increasing and profits were growing. Instead, Patricia said with bitter realization, he was using money stolen from his own family and elderly customers to maintain the lifestyle that made him look successful and trustworthy. The pattern of Derek's manipulation was becoming clear. He had used his reputation as the responsible family leader to gain access to financial information and emotional leverage that he then exploited to steal money from multiple sources while simultaneously isolating me as a scapegoat for family financial pressures. But perhaps the most painful realization for everyone was understanding how willing they had been to believe negative things about me without ever asking for my perspective or investigating Derek's claims. Years of family relationships had been damaged by lies that served Derek's criminal enterprise. "I owe you an apology," my mother said, taking my hand across the table. "I believed Derek's stories about your selfishness and absence without ever asking you directly about your perspective on family responsibilities." "We all owe you apologies," Marcus added. "Derek convinced us that you thought you were better than the rest of the family, and we accepted that explanation without ever questioning why someone who thought she was superior would continue trying to maintain family relationships." As the family began to understand the scope of Derek's betrayal, they also began to realize that healing these relationships would require more than apologies. It would require rebuilding trust that had been systematically undermined by years of manipulation and lies. But first, we needed to understand the full extent of the damage Derek had caused both financially and emotionally to everyone he claimed to love. Federal agents had been coordinating with local law enforcement throughout the evening, and as Derek's arrest became official, the legal machinery began moving with the efficiency of a well-prepared prosecution. Detective Martinez explained that they had been building cases against Derek for months, waiting for the right moment to act, when they could capture the most comprehensive evidence of his criminal enterprise. "The restaurant incident tonight was actually the trigger we needed to move forward with arrests," Detective Martinez told us as we watched Derek being loaded into a federal transport vehicle. "We've been monitoring his activities through financial surveillance, victim complaints, and intercepted communications. Tonight's credit card fraud gave us probable cause to execute search warrants and seize evidence from his home business and personal accounts." Agent Sarah Chen, who had arrived to coordinate the federal investigation, spread documents across our table that painted a comprehensive picture of Derek's criminal activities. Patterson Construction has been operating as a front for systematic fraud targeting working-class families, elderly homeowners, and family members. The scope of the criminal enterprise extends beyond simple theft into organized racketeering. Amanda, who had been sitting in shocked silence since Derek's arrest, finally spoke with the voice of someone whose entire worldview had collapsed. "Agent Chen, what happens to me and my children? Our house, our cars, our bank accounts. Is everything we own the result of stolen money?" "Mrs. Patterson, will be conducting asset forfeiture proceedings to recover stolen funds for victim restitution. However, the court will consider the welfare of minor children and spouses who were not involved in the criminal activities. You'll likely be able to retain basic necessities and housing, but luxury items and assets purchased with fraudulent proceeds will be seized. Jessica was crying as she processed the implications for Derek's children. Those kids have no idea their father is a criminal. They think he's a successful businessman who takes care of the family. The federal prosecutor will be working with family services to ensure that Derek's children receive appropriate counseling and support during his prosecution and incarceration, Agent Chen explained. Unfortunately, children of white-collar criminals often struggle with the revelation that their comfortable lifestyle was built on victimizing other families. The agent showed us photographs taken during the search of Derek's home office that revealed the sophisticated nature of his criminal planning. Filing cabinets contain detailed records of family financial information, forged documents, victim targeting lists, and what appeared to be psychological profiles of extended family members that identified their vulnerabilities and potential exploitation strategies. Your brother maintained detailed files on every family member, including financial records, personal weaknesses, and relationship dynamics that he used to manipulate family interactions and isolate potential whistleblowers, Agent Chen explained. Uncle Robert stared at a photograph showing a file folder labeled with his name that contained copies of his tax returns, medical bills, and what appeared to be notes about his drinking habits and marital problems. Derek has been spying on all of us and documenting information he could use against us. The level of surveillance and manipulation your brother conducted against his own family is consistent with organized crime family structures, the agent confirmed. He used family loyalty and trust as weapons to maintain control over his victims and prevent them from comparing notes about his activities. Marcus discovered that Derek had been maintaining a file on him that included details about his engagement, career progression, and financial obligations that had been used to time requests for family contributions and referrals to Patterson Construction. He's been treating our family relationships like a business intelligence operation. But the most disturbing discovery was a detailed timeline Derek had maintained showing his systematic isolation of me from family activities and his careful coordination of family members' negative opinions about my character and family commitment. Your brother's files show that isolating you was a deliberate strategy to prevent family members from accessing accurate financial information and to create a scapegoat for financial pressures caused by his theft, Agent Chen explained. He documented specific talking points and coordinated family members' responses to ensure consistent messaging about your supposed selfishness. The evidence showed that Derek had been planning tonight's restaurant humiliation for over 6 months, carefully timing it to coincide with increased federal scrutiny of his business activities. He had apparently hoped that forcing me to pay for an expensive family dinner would solidify the family narrative about my financial obligations while demonstrating his continued control over family dynamics. The restaurant incident was meant to be a public demonstration of your submission to his authority, Detective Martinez explained. He needed the family to see you accepting financial responsibility for family expenses to justify his future requests for money from family members who believed you were finally contributing appropriately. Jennifer's teenage daughter, who had been quietly observing the legal proceedings, asked the question that cut to the heart of Derek's criminal psychology. Why did Uncle Derek think it was okay to steal from his own family and hurt so many people? Agent Chen's response revealed the chilling mindset of family-based financial predators. White-collar criminals who target family members often rationalize their crimes by claiming they're entitled to family resources or that they're providing leadership that family members should pay for. Your uncle appears to have genuinely believed that his role as family coordinator justified taking money from relatives and using their trust for his personal benefit. The psychological evaluation that would be conducted as part of Derek's prosecution would likely reveal narcissistic personality traits and entitlement thinking that made him view family members as resources to be exploited rather than people deserving of love and protection. The federal charges your brother faces include identity theft, wire fraud, elder abuse, racketeering, and organized financial crimes, Detective Martinez explained. Given the scope of his criminal enterprise and the number of victims involved, he's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Amanda broke down completely as the reality of Derek's situation sank in. 15 to 20 years. My children will be adults by the time their father gets out of prison. Mrs. Patterson, federal prosecutors will be offering plea agreements that could reduce that sentence if Derek cooperates with ongoing investigations and provides restitution to his victims. However, given the systematic nature of his crimes and the vulnerability of many victims, substantial prison time is inevitable. As the legal machinery continued to process Derek's arrest and the evidence of his crimes, our family was left to grapple with the emotional aftermath of discovering that the person we had trusted to hold us together had actually been systematically destroying us from within. But the final revelation was still ahead, and it would complete our understanding of just how deep Derek's betrayal had run and how close he had come to destroying not just individual family members, but the entire foundation of trust that holds families together. As news of Derek's arrest spread throughout our community over the following days, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of the shame and embarrassment I had anticipated, people began reaching out with stories that painted a completely different picture of my character and Derek's reputation than anything our family had believed. The first call came from Margaret Hendricks, an elderly client whose retirement planning I had handled 3 years earlier. "Brianna, I saw the news about your brother's arrest, and I wanted you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done for my family. When my husband died and left me with complicated financial arrangements, you spent hours helping me understand my options without ever charging me for the extra time." More calls followed throughout the week. Tom Bradley, whose father had been victimized by Derek's construction fraud, contacted me with information that revealed the extent of my reputation in the community versus Derek's actual standing among people who had worked with him professionally. "Brianna, I need you to know that when my dad was struggling with Derek's construction scam, 3 different people told me I should contact you for financial advice about protecting his remaining assets. Everyone in our neighborhood knows you as someone who helps families in crisis without taking advantage of their situations." Linda Morrison, whose kitchen renovation had been abandoned by Derek, had a story that shocked me. "Derek actually used your name when he was selling us on Patterson Construction. He said his sister was a successful financial advisor who had recommended our family for priority service because we were dealing with my mother's medical expenses. He used your reputation to convince us to trust him." As more community members shared their experiences, a pattern emerged that revealed Derek had been systematically using my professional reputation to build credibility for his criminal schemes, while simultaneously telling our family that I was selfish and uncaring. Maria Santos, whose grandmother had been victimized by Derek's accessibility renovation scam, provided the most damning evidence of this pattern. Derek told my grandmother that his sister Brianna had personally reviewed our family situation and recommended us for a special program that provided discounted renovations for elderly stroke victims. He said you had vouched for our character and financial stability. "I never reviewed your family's situation, and I never recommended anyone for renovation programs." I told her, feeling sick about how Derek had weaponized my reputation. "We know that now, but at the time, hearing that a respected financial advisor had personally endorsed Derek's services made us feel safe about giving him access to my grandmother's insurance settlement money." Sarah Chen, my business partner, had been conducting her own investigation into how Derek's criminal activities had intersected with my professional network. Brianna, I've contacted 12 different families who were victimized by Derek's construction fraud. In 11 of those cases, he specifically mentioned your name and professional reputation as endorsement for his services. But none of those families ever contacted me directly for verification. That's where Derek was particularly manipulative. He told each family that you were too busy with high-profile clients to handle their small residential matters, but that you had specifically recommended Patterson Construction as the best option for working-class families who needed honest, affordable service. The cruel irony was becoming clear. Derek had built his criminal enterprise partly on the foundation of my professional reputation for honesty and client care, while simultaneously convincing our family that I was too selfish and career-focused to care about their needs. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, whose elderly mother had been targeted by Derek's home refinancing scam, contacted me with information that revealed how extensively Derek had researched potential victims. Derek knew details about my mother's financial situation that he could only have obtained by researching your client base and identifying vulnerable elderly people in your professional network. Are you saying Derek was targeting my clients specifically? Not just your clients, but people who had heard about your reputation for helping seniors with financial planning. He used your name as a door opener, then exploited their trust to steal their money. Agent Chen confirmed this during a follow-up interview about the federal investigation. Your brother had compiled detailed lists of elderly community members who had received financial planning services from reputable advisors. He used that information to target victims who would be likely to trust recommendations from professionals they perceived as similar to advisors who had helped them previously. The community support that emerged during this period was overwhelming. Families I had helped over the years began sharing stories publicly about my character that directly contradicted everything Derek had told our relatives about my selfishness and lack of compassion. Kevin Rodriguez, the bank security officer who had flagged Derek's fraudulent loan applications, reached out with information that stunned me. Brianna, when Derek was using your name on loan applications, I actually called your office to verify the co-signer information. Your assistant explained that you never co-sign business loans and that anyone claiming your endorsement should be reported to authorities immediately. You tried to warn people about Derek's fraud. We flagged his applications and shared information with other financial institutions in the area. Derek's name was circulated through banking security networks as a suspected identity thief months before his arrest. The revelation that Derek's criminal activities had been known to financial professionals while our family remained completely unaware highlighted how successfully he had compartmentalized his life and manipulated different groups with completely different narratives about his character and activities. Perhaps the most moving support came from families whose financial crises I had helped navigate over the years. They organized a community meeting to publicly counter the narrative Derek had been spreading about my character, and to ensure that everyone understood the truth about both his criminal activities and my actual reputation in the community. Eleanor Walsh, the elderly woman Derek had convinced to refinance her home, stood up at that meeting and delivered a statement that brought tears to my eyes. Derek Patterson told me his sister Brianna was too important and successful to waste time on ordinary families like mine. But when I called Brianna's office after Derek disappeared with my money, she spent 2 hours on the phone with me that same day, helping me understand my options for protecting my home and connecting me with legal resources to recover my losses. That's not the behavior of someone who thinks she's too good for her community. The community meeting revealed that Derek's reputation among people who had worked with him professionally was completely different from his image within our family. While he had convinced relatives that he was a devoted family leader, business colleagues and customers had been documenting his dishonesty and reporting his activities to authorities for months. As this support network emerged, I began to understand that Derek's most successful manipulation had been convincing our family that I was isolated and disconnected from community values, when in reality, I had been building relationships based on genuine service while he had been exploiting trust and destroying lives throughout our area. The contrast between Derek's actual reputation and his carefully constructed family image would become a crucial element in his prosecution as federal prosecutors use community testimony to demonstrate the systematic nature of his deception and the extensive harm his crimes had caused to vulnerable families throughout our region. 6 months after Derek's arrest, our family gathered again for Thanksgiving. But this time, the setting was my home, and the dynamics had been fundamentally transformed by truth, accountability, and genuine healing. Derek was awaiting trial in federal detention, having been denied bail due to flight risk and the ongoing discovery of additional victims across multiple states. Amanda and her children had moved in with Derek's parents temporarily while federal prosecutors worked through asset forfeiture proceedings. The house Derek had bought with stolen money was being sold to provide restitution to his victims, but Amanda would be allowed to keep enough assets to maintain basic stability for herself and the children. "It's strange," Amanda said as she helped me prepare dinner in my kitchen. "I thought I knew Derek completely, but now I realize I was just another one of his victims. He manipulated me just as much as he manipulated everyone else, just in different ways." Jessica and I had been working through family counseling sessions designed to help us understand how Derek's manipulation had damaged our relationship and how we could rebuild trust based on honest communication, rather than the filtered information Derek had been providing to both of us for years. "I spent so many years believing you didn't care about the family," Jessica said as we worked together to set the table. "Derek was so convincing when he showed me those fake text messages and explained your supposed reactions to family events. I feel terrible about how easily I accepted his version of your character without ever asking you directly." My mother had perhaps struggled the most with the revelations about Derek's criminal activities and her own role in enabling his manipulation of family finances. The guilt she felt about providing Derek with my credit card information and believing his lies about my character had required professional counseling to address. I should have known better," she said, as she arranged flowers for the centerpiece. "A mother should be able to tell when one of her children is manipulating her to hurt another one of her children. But Derek was so convincing, and his explanations always seemed so reasonable." My father's recovery had accelerated dramatically once Derek was removed from his financial affairs and medical coordination. When he regained access to his actual medical bills and insurance statements, he discovered that his care was costing far less than Derek had claimed, and that his insurance coverage was much more comprehensive than Derek had indicated. "Derek convinced me that I was a financial burden on the family," Dad explained as he carved the turkey with steady hands. "He made me feel guilty about being sick and expensive, so I stopped asking questions about costs or treatment options. Now I realize he was using my guilt and fear to prevent me from discovering his theft." Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia had joined us for dinner, along with several other family members who had been victims of Derek's financial manipulation. The conversation around our table was markedly different from previous family gatherings, characterized by honesty, accountability, and genuine concern for each other's welfare, rather than the performative family harmony Derek had orchestrated to cover his crimes. "We owe you more than apologies, Brianna," Uncle Robert said during the meal. "We participated in Derek's campaign to isolate you and make you feel unwelcome in your own family. Even if we were being manipulated, we still chose to believe negative things about your character without ever asking for your perspective." Marcus had brought his fiancée Rachel, and their relationship with me had been completely rebuilt on the foundation of truth, rather than Derek's manufactured grievances. I've learned that family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, not blindly supporting family members who are causing damage. Marcus said. "A real love requires accountability and honesty, even when those things are uncomfortable." Grandma Margaret, who was now living comfortably in assisted living, paid for by funds recovered from Derek's accounts, had regained the weight and vitality she had lost while sacrificing her nutrition to fund Derek's criminal lifestyle. Derek taught me an important lesson about the difference between helping family and being exploited by family, she said with the wisdom that had been sharpened by her experience as a victim. "What's the difference, Grandma?" Jessica's daughter asked with the curiosity of someone trying to understand how to recognize manipulation in her own future relationships. "Helping family feels good and brings people closer together," Grandma Margaret explained. "Being exploited feels bad and creates distance and resentment. Derek always made me feel guilty and afraid when he asked for money, and he always had reasons why I couldn't talk to other family members about our financial arrangements. That should have been a warning sign." The federal prosecution of Derek had resulted in a 20-year sentence after he refused to accept a plea bargain that would have required him to admit guilt and provide detailed information about his criminal methods. His trial had revealed the extent of his crimes across multiple states and had led to additional prosecutions of people who had been collaborating with his schemes. Derek's prosecution has helped more than 60 families recover stolen money and obtain justice for financial crimes, Detective Martinez had explained during the sentencing hearing. But perhaps, more importantly, the case has educated our community about the warning signs of family-based financial abuse and given other victims the courage to report similar crimes. The restitution payments Derek was required to make would continue for years, beyond his prison sentence. But most of his victims had already received partial compensation through asset forfeiture and the liquidation of his fraudulent business holdings. As our family dinner continued, I found myself reflecting on the painful lessons Derek's betrayal had taught all of us about the difference between healthy family relationships and toxic manipulation disguised as family loyalty. I think Derek's biggest lie was convincing us that family love means never asking difficult questions or holding each other accountable for harmful behavior, I said as we shared dessert and reflected on the year's events. He used our desire to believe the best about family members as a weapon against our ability to protect each other from his crimes. My mother nodded thoughtfully. Real family love means caring enough about each other's welfare to speak up when something seems wrong, even if it causes conflict in the short term. Derek convinced us that keeping peace was more important than protecting each other from harm. Amanda's experience as Derek's wife had given her unique insight into how family-based manipulation operates within intimate relationships. Derek made me believe that questioning his explanations or asking for detailed financial information showed a lack of trust and love. He convinced me that good wives and family members don't investigate or verify, they just support and believe. But trust without verification isn't actually love, Jessica added. It's just enabling. People who genuinely care about you want you to feel safe asking questions and seeking independent confirmation of important information. As the evening continued and family members shared their own insights about recognizing and preventing manipulation, I realized that Derek's criminal betrayal had ultimately strengthened our family relationships by forcing us to build new foundations based on honesty, accountability, and genuine mutual support. "The hardest lesson for me," I said as the evening drew to a close, "has been learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when that means facing their anger and rejection in the short term." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. If I had quietly paid that restaurant bill 6 months ago and accepted Derek's narrative about my family obligations, he would have continued stealing from all of you, and more elderly people in our community would have been victimized by his construction fraud. Sometimes protecting people you love means exposing painful truths, even when those truths destroy relationships temporarily. Uncle Robert raised his glass in a toast that captured the evening spirit of healing and growth, to learning the difference between family loyalty and family enabling, to asking difficult questions because we care about each other's safety, and to rebuilding relationships on foundations of honesty instead of convenient lies. As I looked around the table at family members who had learned to love each other honestly rather than enabling each other destructively, I realized that Derek's attempt to destroy our family had ultimately taught us how to become a healthier, stronger family than we had ever been before. The most important lesson was understanding that genuine family love requires courage. The courage to ask difficult questions, to challenge harmful behavior, and to prioritize each other's long-term welfare over short-term comfort. Derek had exploited our desire to avoid conflict and our willingness to accept convenient explanations, using our love for each other as a weapon against our ability to protect each other. True family bonds, I had learned, are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the shared commitment to each other's genuine welfare, not on blind loyalty, unquestioned trust, or the fear of causing temporary disappointment. Sometimes the greatest act of love for your family is refusing to participate in systems that enable harm, even when that refusal initially looks like betrayal, to people who have been taught to confuse enabling with caring. Has someone in your family ever used guilt, obligation, or family loyalty to manipulate your financial decisions or isolate you from other family members? Have you ever discovered that a trusted family member was telling different stories about you to different relatives? I'd love to hear your experiences with family manipulation and how you learned to set healthy boundaries while maintaining genuine love and connection. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own family experiences. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building healthier relationships, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the warning signs of family-based financial manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize that standing up for truth and accountability in family relationships, even when it's painful, is sometimes the most loving gift you can give to the people you care about most. Remember, healthy families grow stronger through honest conversations, not weaker. When someone tries to convince you that asking questions or seeking verification damages family relationships, that's often a sign that they have something to hide that would genuinely damage those relationships if discovered. Take care of yourselves and each other, and never let anyone convince you that love means accepting abuse or enabling harmful behavior.